Welcome back, everyone. I came across this recent survey from National Debt Settlement, and quite eye-opening, but let's just face the fact that debt, especially in retirement, is not only robbing pre-retiree and retirees' quality of life, it is robbing their financial security in the future. So let's look at these findings from National Debt Relief, entitled Debt is a Reality for Most Older Americans, Putting Retirement Plans on Hold. So diving into this, this very interesting, the span of this particular survey was extensive. It says in February 2025, National Debt Relief partnered with Talker Research to survey 1,000 Gen Xers, that's someone my age, 55 or older, and 1,000 baby boomers, so 2,000. The results show that debt is not only common, but also deeply disruptive to the financial and emotional well-being of older Americans. So let's dive in real briefly, some of the highlights or lowlights, depending on how you look at it, on this survey. First is 72% of respondents say they have accumulated at least some debt, with over half saying that their debt has held them back in life, and it could be holding them back in a number of ways. Also, half reported they feel overwhelmed by the debt and they feel like they'll never pay it off. That is certainly a sense of financial hopelessness. Credit card debt is the most common, not surprising, with 45% of the survey respondents carrying a monthly balance, and on average they owe nearly $9,000. That's a staggering amount, and pay about $400+ a month. And medical debt is also common. Nearly 1 in 5, or 17% of those responding to the survey, say they carry an average of $9,100 in outstanding medical bills. So National Debt Relief did an excellent job on these infographics. So the impact on older Americans, we discussed this. Over half of older Americans say their debt has held them back. These are the numbers we just went over. 72% have accumulated debt. Nearly 50% have credit card debt. And then over 50% are concerned they'll never be able to pay it off. Look at this. 67% of non-retired respondents, and that's probably a lot of Gen Xers, believe that they will need to continue working well past their planned retirement date to support themselves and their families. They got to work longer to pay off that debt. And nearly half of those say they only have, and this is the shocking number, especially for you as reverse mortgage professionals, keep this in mind when you're meeting with older homeowners. Half of those survey respondents say they only have $20,000 or less, and even worse, 1 in 5 say they don't have any savings at all, living basically from paycheck to paycheck. There's a big concern when it comes to Social Security. Over 3/4 believe that Social Security payments will not be enough to support them in their non-working years, and many of them feel like Social Security benefits themselves could be endangered. The other problem that many of them cite in the survey is that their biggest barrier, they say, to paying off debt is not earning enough income. Now, if you look at that and just think for a moment, that's probably because they incurred debt based on their current income, and then they realize, oh, now my cash flow is constrained. So that's really not a big surprise there. Other barriers include high interest rates, with 30% saying that they believe that their interest rates are so high it's really making them pay longer and longer on the loan. And 72% of respondents say the economy is one of the main reasons they can't save, followed by debt at 36%. And talk about delays. The survey found that the average age of the survey respondent is 61, yet they estimate they're going to be needing an average of 12 more years to reach their savings goals so they can retire well beyond the Social Security Administration's full retirement age of 67. And so this survey, I think, is very insightful. I would encourage you to at least look at it in its entirety. I'm going to include a link in the show notes, but it's very sobering to see just what debt, the impact of debt is having on older Americans. That's folks my age or older. So we're looking again at Gen X's and then also baby boomer generation. So they surveyed 1,000 from Gen X and 1,000 from the baby boomers. This is just quite thought-provoking and in some cases a little hard-hitting, to say the least. So this is where you, as a reverse mortgage professional, perhaps can bring some much-needed relief to the cash flow woes of older Americans. And from Yahoo Finance, we're seeing that Florida's home values are, well, they're softening at the very least and coming down substantially in some locales. So if you are originating in the state of Florida, you want to be especially mindful of this. This comes from Yahoo Finance. It says that Florida's pandemic era housing boom is starting to fade. I would go a step further and say that pandemic boom is gone. The post-pandemic boom is no more. And these are the trends that they're seeing in the state. For example, for sale inventory in the state of Florida is at its highest level on record, and homes are staying on the market longer, even as peak home buying season kicks off. So that's the number of days that a house is listed on the multiple listing service, and it's staying on much longer. Also, the migration to Florida has slowed. It should come as no big surprise, because what has Florida been in the news for lately? Well, two things. One is hurricanes, and second is insanely high homeowners insurance premiums. And then if you were to add a third, you could say the new assessments on condominiums, because that condominium collapse led to a state law which has really made condos almost unaffordable, even for seniors who have been in the condo and have it paid off. They just simply cannot afford it. So there's a lot of forces at play, headwinds against the Florida real estate market. Ben Greco, who's a real estate agent in the southwestern city of Port Charlotte, said inventory and time on market have been dramatically increasing. It's not like borrowers have left by any means, but there's just so much to choose from, and that's really pushing prices down. In fact, listings across the state have gone above pre-pandemic levels in January of this year, that according to Realtor.com. They have now more than 168,000 homes that are actively listed on the market. And now homes are staying on the multiple listing service or being listed for sale for an average of 75 days when it was only 13 just 1 year ago. And then here's where single home prices are coming down the fastest. You can see right here, North Point, Florida, 5.3. Punta Gorda's down 7.6. Cape Coral, and you got Naples, and then Key West coming down very little. By the way, a beautiful location. If you've never been there, it's very worth the trip. And if you want to see the Hemingway house, I would encourage that as well. We had a family wedding there. It was wonderful. As of January, single-family home prices were coming down the fastest in a cluster of cities on the southern Gulf Coast, and prices on the North Point and high-end Gulf-focused cities of Naples have actually come down more than 3% in the last year. So what is the general sentiment Well, we have Hurricane Ian, of course. We have the memories of the coastline storm, which was the biggest in the state's history in 2022. That has led to just a homeowner's insurance nightmare. And now buyers are asking questions about the flooding history of a property, and sellers are more motivated to complete transactions before the next hurricane season. And here's just a reminder of the destructive forces of the hurricanes that do come through the state of Florida, unfortunately, on a semi-regular basis. But Yahoo Finance notes that even as prices are coming down, home buyers are really struggling to afford what's left for sale. And why is that? Because the median listing price in the Sunshine State is $435,000. Now, that's a little bit less since mid-2022, but they know it's still over 30% more than it was at the end of 2019. So you can see the massive price distortion created by the COVID-19 pandemic, the massive stimulus from the federal government, the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates to near zero, which led to mortgage rates being, 3.5%, just out of this world interest rates, which really fueled this FOMO, fear of missing out market. Everyone had to buy a house, right? Get the deals. And of course, all the home prices were lifted up with that. Now, of course, this is a benefit for would-be home buyers. In fact, in many markets that are cooling off, agents are saying they're seeing offers that are $20,000 below the asking price, which are often being accepted. And sellers are being willing to make any repairs that come up during inspection. And I would add, as sellers should, if you're serious about selling your home. Again, this is not 2021 or 2022 anymore. The seller is not the king of the world. Now, you as a reverse mortgage or mortgage professional are well aware that the behavior in the housing market at large, of course, is going to directly influence reverse mortgage lending, which is based on a home's value. And so if we're seeing that there's more price cuts or home sellers are willing to reduce their home's price, that's going to put some downward pressure on home prices. And so older homeowners who may be interested in a reverse mortgage in the Sunshine State may be looking at a little less home value that's going to be calculated into their reverse mortgage proceeds. So, but buyer incentives are beginning to pop up, especially when it comes to new construction. We've noticed over the last couple of years that the prices are actually better for new construction in many markets across the nation than they are for existing homes. And that's because homeowners are emotionally attached to their property, and they tend to be very reluctant to drop the price. Most of the listings I'm seeing in my home state, in my hometown, quite frankly, are unrealistic. Homeowners have still not woke up and smelled the coffee. So this chart gives us just a little taste of what's going on in Florida when it comes to the number of homes for sale. So we had the housing inventory here, 2019. Now we exceeded that with 168,000 units. But look at this. As homes were just rapidly selling, it just went down to 35,000. That's a super tight housing market in Florida. And then now we've shot back up to 168,000 as of February. So this is what's applying the downward pressure. Supply increases, and then we see that there is going to be a little less demand. So supply and demand. So we're going to see more downward pressure as inventory continues to accelerate. How much we don't know. Now, when it comes to migration, Florida added a net of 64,000 people from other parts of the nation last year, but that's down considerably from more than 100,000 who moved there in 2023 and over 300,000 in 2022. So there are some demographic forces at play. We're going to include a link in the show notes for those of you who would like to read the entirety of this column, especially if you're marketing in the Florida housing market, whether you're doing traditional or reverse mortgages. So be sure to look for that. As many of you know that are longtime listeners or viewers of this podcast, I kind of dig around the internet every week looking for stories that are relevant for you as a mortgage professional, especially a reverse mortgage professional. And this is one I came across this last week from Moravec, Varga, and Mooney. They're an LA probate and estate planning firm, and they are talking about how do you probate a house in the state of California with a reverse mortgage. Now, keep in mind, these probate laws are, of course, specific to the Golden State, but some of the advice they give here, quite frankly, is applicable to any state in the union. And they note that navigating the probate process for a California home that has a reverse mortgage on it, it can be uniquely challenging for heirs and estate administrators. Any of you out there watching who have encountered family members trying to sort this out can just nod your head yes right now. It says understanding the intricacies of a reverse and its implications is essential to be able to effectively manage and preserve the estate assets. In other words, if you don't take care of things promptly, they can lose a sizable asset if their home still has equity. So they talk a little bit about what the reverse mortgage is, and then the probate necessity for homes with a reverse mortgage. Now, I'm not an estate planning attorney, but probate is the special process for those that don't have an estate plan. So if a homeowner with a reverse passes away without placing a property in a trust, such as a revocable living trust, or designating a transfer on death beneficiary, they write that the property usually must undergo the wonderful process of probate in order to transfer legal title to the heirs or the designated beneficiary. And so all probate does is the legal validation of the wishes of the deceased and the lawful distribution of assets. But here's what you really want to take away from this column, and these are the suggestions and the tips they have for families that are seeking to settle a property that's in probate, but it has a reverse mortgage. And the first is so important. That's immediate notification. Too often, heirs and family members, and I can't always blame them, get a little overwhelmed, but they want to immediately contact as soon as possible and contact the lender or the servicer and let them know that the last borrower has passed away. And please pardon the sneezing. It is certainly allergy season here in Northern California. Yes, all of our vehicles are powdered with yellow pollen. So what are the repayment options on a reverse? First, they say is to sell. They say that's perhaps the most practical solution. And then any remaining equity would go to the estate for distribution. The next option is to refinance, and that's for someone who wishes to retain the property. They may want to consider refinancing that reverse mortgage into a traditional mortgage loan. And then there's initiating the probate process, and then, of course, being in constant communication with the lender or the loan servicer. And that's so important because they want to see what? One thing, and that is that the heirs are making progress. What have you done lately? What will you be doing? What are the timeline? What's the waypoints through that process? The servicer, you want to keep them informed throughout that process. Now, if they don't do these things, then of course there's a risk of foreclosure and equity deficiency. However, when it comes to refinancing a property that's in probate, but it has a reverse mortgage attached, and there is either no equity left or the family wants to purchase it, there are some caveats that Understanding Reverses Dan Hultquist gives, and that wasn't included in the article. I wish it would have been, but many of you are familiar with Dan. But in his book, Navigating Reverse, of which I have a copy on my desk, and you should too, he writes that FHA will typically allow an heir to refinance 95% of the home's value in cases where no equity remains and the home is upside down or underwater. But then he cautions, however, for the 95% option to apply, there must be a quote-unquote sale of the property. And he adds, in 2013, HUD expanded the definition of sale to include any post-death conveyance of the property. So as long as there is a post-death conveyance of the property, then the heirs or the estate administrators have that option to make that happen. But in conclusion, for any of you who have reverse mortgage borrowers and you have their family members contact you and say mom or dad or both have passed away, this blog may be a useful resource, at least to get the wheels rolling. And of course, they'll want to get their own probate attorney if necessary. You do not want to go through probate without legal counsel. But again, this column really offers some real practical tips to help avoid a lot of headaches and problems in getting a home with a reverse mortgage attached through the probate process.